Hello, and welcome back to Unleash the Goats, where we unleash ourselves upon the Star Wars franchise with reckless abandon, and nobody quite knows what we'll say next, least of all us. I'm Nat, she, her. Angela, say hi.
Hi, I'm Angela /Faye, she, her.
Sugar, say hi.
Hi, I'm Sugar, she, her.
Happy New Year at time of release.
New Year.
This will come out exactly on the New Year.
That's huge for us.
This is big.
Welcome to the New Year. We're going to talk about planets today. Specifically planets that most people, not just me, which is huge, most Star Wars fans may not have heard of. So I'm very excited to be in the majority for this one.
Well, today we're talking about Star Wars planets because I love Star Wars planets. They make no fucking sense. If you have ever taken a geology class or looked at one of those, like, books that explain how the Earth's crust works, or how evolution works, you will know that most of the planets in Star Wars don't make a ton of sense. Most of them are monocultures for some reason. Like, there's just one climate for the whole planet, which is not how planets work for the most part. If they have an atmosphere, usually there's some differentiation in the areas, but not in Star Wars. No, Star Wars they're all special in their own special ways. And there's not like a weird explanation like there is in like Stargate, I think is the name of it, or
I mean, Stargate is a thing, but I don't remember
Yeah,
Stargate having
like-
a monoculture.
no, they have a thing where like the planets that have life were all seeded by the same ancient beings, and that's why all the planets are like that have life have like similar evolutionary like things, that they're all like Earth-ish, whereas like this one's just like, nope, they're all just this way for reasons, and there's no like explanation for why humans are the dominant race in like all of these different planets and seemingly all evolved separately, because there's no like main history for like where the humans originated from or anything like that. Presumably there is like in the deep lore, but it doesn't get brought up ever. It's not important. So the first planet we're going to talk about is a planet that's very cute. I like it. It's named after the day that A New Hope came out, so its name is 5251977, which is, you know, May 25th, 1977.
Nice.
1977. Hold on.
So this is where the rebellion ran to after Hoth. It's only a little bit larger, and that's kind of like the most that they have for it. Like, they had a bigger base and they had more starfighters. And because it was like a really slow moving planet, their days and nights would last like weeks at a time. So they go to this planet and they need to immediately put up like vitamin D lights and stuff, because you're just in the dark for like a week at a time. And then you have the opposite problem, like Alaska, where like it's just sunlight for weeks at a time. So it's, you know, that's exciting for everybody. I'm sure after the snow on Hoth, they're really excited to have more sunshine
For
for
half
a
of the
couple
time.
weeks. Yeah, for half of the time. Once a month. 1 month you get all the sunshine. The next month it's just darkness.
That seems possible for a planet. That seems scientifically sound.
Yeah, this is actually pretty reasonable lore-wise. You like getting a slow rotation, like that's pretty reasonable,
Yeah.
honestly. There are planets that do that in the real life and everything. Small plug for a lovely podcast is Exolore, which is a great podcast where this like lovely astronomer woman does these really cool episodes about like potential planets and like how life could evolve on different types of planets. They're really cool. Highly recommend her. We're doing this in alphabetical order. So next we have Octu, which was invented for the sequels for reasons. And it's just Ireland, but a planet, essentially. That's kind of,
I would live there.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
They shot it in Ireland, and so they were like, yeah, this is just the whole planet. It's just all like these islands and stuff for reasons.
Which also feels fairly reasonable that it's just a water planet. Mostly ocean, couple of little rocky outcrops.
Yeah, like that's like one of the more reasonable ones on the list, honestly. It's just like a lot of islands over here.
Do we see anything other? There are the little guys that exist solely to be cute that are based off of the puffins.
The ports.
Yes. Is that the only life form other than like Luke, who obviously is not from there, that we see?
There's the deleted scene community.
Yeah, there's the character. Well, the caretakers are in the main scenes, aren't they?
Are they? I don't remember.
Because they like fight with Rey or something.
I don't remember there being anybody else in the actual, and I'm not willing to go back to watch it again just to prove that. But
I'm not sure, and I will not be finding out.
there's also the blue milk creature that's there.
Yes,
But-
there is the creature that spews blue milk for reasons.
For reasons.
Which apparently actually tasted really good as compared to the... No, it's green milk. It's green milk.
Is it green? Okay.
On Octu, because blue milk is the original one, which tasted nasty.
Oh.
And Mark Hamill said that the green milk that they made for this movie was delicious. It was like coconut milk and some flavoring, and it was really good.
And presumably some food coloring.
Yes, presumably some food coloring. They probably sell it at
Disneyland.
Disney. If you would really like some, I'm sure it's incredibly authentic.
A glass.
Yes, for $11.
Yes.
Did you know that they made Pepsi like a canon thing in Star Wars so that they could sell like Pepsi and Sprite and stuff in the Star Wars section of Disney?
How
Yes.
did they go about canonizing Pepsi?
They are shaped like little hand grenades. The bottles are.
You know what? I forgive you.
And they have like Coke written on them in like Star Wars writing. I forget what it's called.
Orbush.
Arbush, thank you. So, that's fun. Anyways, Octu is supposedly where the Jedi Order was founded by the Prime Jedi. The Prime Jedi, I'm putting in air quotes because who knows? They made this up.
We might find out more about this if Dawn of the Jedi ever becomes a thing.
Maybe. I have no faith. I have, as I've said on this podcast multiple times, when they put a movie out that actually comes out in the theaters, I'll believe them when they say they have more Star Wars movies coming out. But yeah, it's Jedi was started there, then they left, and they kind of never came back until Luke showed up. Like, they argue that there was like a lot of different places that they can consider be the birthplace of the Order, but they consider this to be technically the original because this is like it's kind of like the Catholic Church where if you follow the branches back far enough, this is kind of like the main branch, but it only counts as like the birthplace as if you consider like none of the other places that they branched off of as being the birthplace because like, you know what I mean? Like they branched off of this one originally, but where they branched off could also be considered a birthplace of these Jedi, like that kind of thing.
I hear you. I always talk about how the Jedi are just like Catholics. I don't say that, and that's not true. And I can see Sugar looking at me with disdain because it's such a wrong thing to say.
You missed it, Nat. I'm so sick right now.
Oh no.
It's not that I'm like upset. I'm just like only 20% here.
Okay.
Poor Sugar's had the worst week. I'm
It's
so
just
sorry.
me and my tea listening to lore right now.
I love that.
Your comfort tea. I love it.
Yes.
Okay, so the next on the list is called Eos Prime, or they mostly just call it Eos. I don't know why the title of it is Eos Prime when it's just Eos. But the whole system is also named Eos because they're lazy. So, I mean, there's that. Do you think if we ever leave Earth, we'll call our solar system like the Earth system? Or will we name it something really pretentious? Like,
Eos Prime.
yeah.
Earth Prime is the solar system. Does our solar system have a name?
We'll continue to call it the solar system. Like the rest of the solar systems, we'll call them something else. But like our solar system, it's the solar system. Just like we keep calling our sun the sun, even though it has a name.
I feel like it would depend on like if we met other people who already had a name for this. System.
That's true.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Historically, we probably wouldn't. What we would do is we'd go to other solar systems and they would call them the solar system, but in their language. And we would be like, yes, that's the name.
Like non-bread.
That just, yes, like non-bread, like chai.
You are the Solarium solar system.
Yes.
We call ours like what do they do in Mass Effect? They call it Soul.
Oh, is that what
They
it
just
is?
call it
They just
sun
call
in
it
Latin.
Soul system.
Yeah.
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 AstronomyStackExchange.com says that Sol System is an invention of science fiction. And it's just called the solar system anyway.
Yeah. Kind of depends on if we ever meet anyone else like us or not, I think. If we're the ones deciding what everything is called, then yeah, we'll probably just end up being the solar system. Because why not?
As we should, honestly. We named it.
Yeah.
The only ones here.
We could have been so much more creative. It's fine.
I know. That's true. That does frustrate me. When you like go to a new town, like their only streets are named like Maple and Main Street, and it's like, you had a whole new town. You had a fresh town. You could have named it something fun. You could have named it Bartholomew Street, or I don't know.
Is Bartholomew more fun than Maple?
Yes. At least it's original.
Maple was original at one point. It's just that everyone liked it.
That's a good point. Name it Grinch Street instead. No one has a Grinch Street.
No one's
Ooh, Grinch Street. Does that exist?
All
We're
right.
doing
Anyway, let's
I
keep hearing
don't
about
have a
Eos
timer
Prime.
going, and you can tell.
Okay. Eos Prime is an ocean planet, completely ocean, and a group of Aosians allowed the Rebel Alliance to have an outpost on their planet. But then, because the First Order sucks, they showed up.
Oh, so Resistance, not Rebel Alliance.
No, it says the Rebel Alliance constructed an outpost. And then during the war with the Resistance, the First Order showed up and was like, oh, this old Rebel Alliance outpost, we're going to attack it, which is rude. The First Order has so much audacity.
Is there anyone even there to attack, or are they just attacking it for the symbolicism of, like, we're just going to take this place out?
So this planet is entirely of water, but the way that the land on this planet works is instead of having random islands, the land is a strip like along the equator, essentially. So what islands there are like in like this like strip around the equator, and they have a planetary ring as well. So there isn't a lot of land at all, but what there is in this like habitable zone.
So it's all like you could start and make a perfect circle around the planet and be on land the whole time.
Except
I
they're
don't know
islands.
if it's a perfect circle because there's still islands.
Okay, they're not all connected. They were just all in a line. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they have like they have like interconnected like rockery caverns and tunnels beneath the surface of the ocean.
That sounds dope.
It's pretty cool. I don't know exactly how that would work because oceans traditionally are pretty deep. So you would have to like go down quite a ways. Like you would have to have like pretty tall volcanoes underneath the water and then go into them. So presumably it's possible because you could have a ring of volcanoes around the equator, and then if they were dormant volcanoes, you could then travel through the lava tubes, through those natural caverns, into the interconnected like volcanoes that way.
It's a lot of ifs.
It's a lot of ifs, and it's a pretty complicated system to exist. And it's also pretty risky because dormant volcanoes do not always stay dormant. And if you have them already connected in these caverns, if one volcano goes off, that puts the like neighboring volcanoes also at risk for like spillover. So it's not particularly a safe place to live. But I mean, they are like I forget blanking on the word, but they can go between water and land. They're amphibians. So I guess they're fine. Like even if they didn't. But yeah, everyone who lives there does die because the First Order orbital bonds them because they helped the Resistance. So
That is a bummer.
I guess I don't have to worry about the volcanoes.
Anyway, Bandamere.
Bandamere. I love Bandamere. Okay, I don't care that much about Bandamere. But Bandamere is interesting because it both shows up in a lot of fan fiction. If you read Obi-Wan fan fiction specifically, it just shows up everywhere because people who love to make Obi-Wan their sad little Ulu boy love to make this like a large central part of his like backstory because it is in Legends. Because in Legends there is a series of books, and one of them, Jedi Little Baby Padawan, Jedi Apprentice, yes, the Jedi Apprentice books. Obi-Wan is enslaved briefly on Bandamere. Sugar knows more about that than I do because she's read them more recently than I have.
For context, this is a planet that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon get sent to right at the very, very beginning of their relationship. Like, before they actually come together as Master and Padawan, Yoda kind of, like, meddles to sort of send both Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon off to Bandamere. Obi-Wan at this point has effectively been kicked out of the Jedi Order because in Jedi Apprentice, this is where there's the whole aging out thing. Where if you get to 13 years old and a master has not picked you yet, you do not get to become a Jedi Knight. You get kicked out and sent off to one of the, what do they call it? Like, cores. I know,
Cores.
The cores.
Technically, you don't get kicked out. You get reassigned from the Jedi Knight portion of your...
Yeah, you get kicked out of the Jedi Knight. You do not get to become a Jedi Knight. You get put onto one of these other pathways. It's like, agriculture, exploration, medical stuff, and engineering or something, I think, are the four options. Obi-Wan gets sent off to agriculture, effectively specifically because Yoda is trying to get him together with Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon is going off to this planet anyway. So he assigns Obi-Wan to the agriculture corps in order to kind of enforce the two of them together. And they end up doing random bullshit on Bandamere, where, as Faye said, he gets briefly for like a couple of days, and he is put into the agricultural core, but then he is taken by some people who are also on the planet doing bad stuff and enslaved for a couple of days. And by the end of this mission, Qui-Gon has accepted Obi-Wan as his Padawan, and that so it's relevant in the sense that it is the very beginning of his relationship with Qui-Gon more than anything else.
Brief side note, but if Yoda was genuinely trying to place Obi-Wan in a core that would like be a good future for him, which one do you think he would match with the best?
I feel like exploration seems like the easiest. Just it gives him the chance to go out and meet people and, you know, just kind of like explore. I mean, there's so many things that fall under the concept of exploration. I've seen people place him in engineering, but I don't get the feeling that he like has a lot of love for it. Like he can do it.
Kind of like piloting. Like he's good at it. He just doesn't love it.
Yeah. Or at least he doesn't love, you know, well, he doesn't love it in the films. I have seen other people, like I've just been starting to read the Padawan book by Kirsten White, that was written as like basically promo for the Obi-Wan show that got made, where he actually seems to enjoy flying a little bit more. Yes, he loses that as he gets older. But anyway, I probably would have placed him in exploration. I feel like most Jedi probably would prefer exploration if they were on the night path. But yeah, just because like there's more like adventure-y things kind of lumped into exploration, presumably.
I like that. I've seen people put him in medical before, just because of his like diplomacy, like bedside manner type thing.
Interesting.
But
I've seen people put him in engineering. I mean, you can do it. I've seen people leave him in agriculture too, and because he's like a scientist and he likes, you know, he's really into that worm in Clone Wars. Like he really wants to be able to study the brain worm.
Yeah.
And he's very upset that Anakin kills it.
Oh my god. Incredible.
That.
I was going to study that. You know, so it's like, and I think there's this, I don't know where it comes from, honestly. There's this whole thing about Qui-Gon and plants, that Qui-Gon really liked plants or something. Like, if that came from Jedi Apprentice, I don't remember right at this moment, but there's this whole thing about Qui-Gon and plants as well. So, like, I've seen people leave him in agriculture and that he actually does quite well in agriculture once he kind of gets used to it. So it's like, you can do whatever you want. Like, I think personally, if you were, like, based on the personality he's given within Jedi Apprentice, if you were going to try to place him somewhere that is, like, best within his personality, I think Explorer Corps like gives him the best options available for what he seems to want in the moment. But that's so very clearly not the point of what Yoda is doing.
If I remember correctly, the plantain thing came mostly from that line in the Phantom Menace when he's like, another pathetic life form master. What are we going to do with this one? And people like started coming up with headcanons that Qui-Gon just kept dragging home like weird life forms, like random plants and shit. Right, and then it kind of morphed from there and then kind of like...
into like Qui-Gon just loves plants and has plants everywhere. Yeah.
He just loves like weird plants and things and brings them back to his house. Yeah. Which, you know, I always think is very funny. So I don't mind it. The Bantamere is significant like geologically because the whole planet was originally this like beautiful like climate of like rolling plains. They just mostly did agriculture like on a massive scale, but then they discovered that there was like a lot of mining available in this planet. Like there was a lot of like really valuable ore and various things. They don't actually list what the valuable ore is because that would be too technological, so they just tell us it's valuable ore that they're mining.
That's the name of the ore.
It was a book written for middle grade people, all right? They're not going into details.
They do have like a bunch of different mines though. Like a lot of that point is that like there's a lot of different kinds of mining happening here. There's deep sea mines, there's regular mines, there's like various zones that are richer than others. And the people who live there, like they're having kind of trade off. Like this is our beautiful home and the mining's going to ruin it, but it's also making us very rich. So it's like there's like a balance there that I feel like we see a lot in like real life too. Like for instance, all the mining happening in the Amazon rainforest because there's valuable stuff there, but also the Amazon rainforest is a really valuable place just like ecologically as well. And people who live there don't want to get rid of it because it's their house that they live there. And so like I like the juxtaposition that they have on this planet. It makes it really interesting. They could have just made it like a wasteland that they happen to find mining ore on, but I like that they took the time to build out like here's some conflict here and here's like some conflicted things. You can like really build out some really creative characters too, because you can have people who like, are good, but they need money, and like they love their planet, but they need to feed their family, and like you can have some interesting conversations in like a space like this. Whereas I feel like if it was just like a straight up blank mining world, you don't get as many opportunities. So I like it when they world build stuff like this.
To be fair, there is some 2D evil shit happening on the planet, obviously,
Oh, for
with
sure.
like literal enslavement, but
There's very little nuance to slavery. In fact, maybe
To
none at
slavery.
all. Maybe it's always bad. Hot take from me.
yeah, and that
Pretty
like
much always bad, yeah.
yeah, and they're being taken advantage of, I think, is part of the idea too, that like the character who's kind of running the mining corporation is like there's a tiny little bit of nuance to him because he is supposed to be a little bit of an Anakin light, but like you know, when we meet him, he's already in the dark portion of his life, so we're not getting the nuanced version of him. He is kind of just like full tilt evil, you know, and lying to everybody and taking advantage of people for his own gain. So that, like, you know, there might be an element of them saying, like, oh, we're getting rich off of this, but that, like, more than anything else, it's this one man kind of getting rich off of it, and he does not give a shit about anybody else or the people of the planet.
Well, for instance, in the Legends version of this history, when the Galactic Empire rises, the miners of Bandamere refuse to deal with the Empire at all. They say absolutely not. Like, we made our deals with the Republic, and you are not the Republic anymore. And they get their asses beat by Vader. Vader shows up and just, like, destroys their shit, and they have to honor their stuff. Essentially, Emperor comes in and takes over the planet after that, because they need the ore for building the Death Star. Yeah. And in Legends, it sucks because, like, it's one of the planets that gets, like, annexed by the Vong, but we don't need to get into the Vong right now. So it's a cool planet. It's interesting.
I can see why people would, like, I can see how that is just enough world building for people to put Fix there. Because they're, like, it's so much potential.
Yeah, there's enough, like, nuance that you can, like, dig into it if you want, but you don't have to if you, like, want to focus on other things, which I feel like is kind of a sweet spot.
There's at least 3 groups of people working, because you've got the people of Bandamere, you've got the mining corporation, which does bring in people from other places, and then you have the Jedi outpost, the Agricor, also kind of working and doing their own thing on Bandamere. And so you have this interaction, and I mean, until the mining, at least Xanatos himself at least gets kicked out. I don't know if the mining corporation itself completely gets kicked out, but a lot of it, I mean, he dies eventually, so I don't know how much of his company, like, continues to operate, and so the people themselves might take over the mines.
Yes, back in the day when killing the person in charge killed the whole company.
Yes. Again, written for middle schoolers. So, you know, they're making things a little bit simpler just to tell a message. But anyway, there is interesting stuff happening on Bandamere, but, you know, the story itself within the narrative of Jedi Apprentice doesn't stay there very long. So I imagine most of the fics are referencing it as, like, this is just very important to Obi-Wan's backstory.
Yeah, here's his many, many nightmares about how awful it was. Or here's him relating to Anakin.
Right.
And, like, explaining that he understands what it's like to be a slave because he lived it for 2 days.
For 2 days, yeah. I know, I've always found that very funny where they're like, he was a slave. And I'm like, for 2 days, man.
For 2 days.
Like,
Anakin was a slave his whole life.
and, like, he barely like, he knows that, like, logically he is one, but he is very much not planning on sticking around for very long. He's not, like, defeated at all by the end of this, you know? Like,
Yeah.
the boy's okay.
He's fine.
His trauma comes from other places.
He's got plenty of drama coming, but, like, I'm sure, like, if you really wanted to dig into it, Bandamere should be impacting him quite a bit, but, like, within the context of what we see, he's, like, not super defeated by the fact that it's more of a, like, a temporary inconvenience is kind of how he's, like, considering it. That he's like, I don't know how this is going to go for me, but, like, I don't think I'm going to be here forever.
Next on my list is Kashyyyk. Now, Kashyyyk is actually pretty well known, even though we don't actually spend a lot of time there in canon. But I wanted to touch on it just because it is really cool that, first of all, the whole planet is just, like, trees. The trees are massive. They're so big. Like, they build their houses, like, into the trees. And most of the time, they spend most of their life, like, in their tree houses. Kind of like the Ewoks, but on a huge scale. And more, like, technologically advanced. Like, the Ewoks are essentially, like, smaller, cuter, more primitive Wookiees. And the Wookiees have been there for a long time. And they've evolved really well. So.
Do they spend any time on the ground?
They do, but mostly to, like, hunt and stuff.
Oh, on the Bad Batch has them riding these giant cat things. That was, like, the one thing that was good in Bad Batch. They go to Kashyyyk, and all the Wookiees are, like, riding these giant cat things to hunt people down. I mean, they're like, hunting down the Empire and things like that. That was very cool. Very much not Legends, but, like, the one thing about Bad Batch that decided to add to Kashyyyk.
Okay, that's actually sick.
Right? Is it not? It's like Wookiees on the backs of giant cats.
I love that.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Not gonna lie, it's pretty cool.
Anyway, that's Kashyyyk.
Technically, the planet is also known as Edian, but that was named that by some colonizers, so they don't call it.
So we don't care.
Yeah. It has, the cool thing about Kashyyyk is that it doesn't have an axial tilt at all. It's perfectly circle. And that's, like, their explanation for why this planet in particular has a monoclimate, because it all experiences the same amount, essentially. It does have, like, a normal core, like metallic core, rocky mantle, the whole shebang, but the whole planet has, like some of their trees are several kilometers high. It's insane. They do have, like, a little bit of, like, desert regions, and, like, in some, like, the mountain ranges, they'll have, like, some more crazy stuff. And then for water, they have an ocean belt around the equator.
Oh, so the opposite of Eos Prime.
Yeah. There is water and stuff on the rest of the planet, but, like, the most of their ocean is, like, on the belt around the middle of the equator, which is, like, essentially where, like, the heat is, like, sinks up from the sun, and then, like, the rest of the planet stays, like, a temperate climate. Most of the stuff on the bottom is technically, like, more of a swamp, because it's just, like, a lot of water and wet soil. So that's why they mostly stay in the top, because if you go down to the bottom, you're going to sink into the mud.
So that's why they don't bother burying the stormtrooper that falls off of their house, is because he fell into a swamp. And so he's fine. They'll never find him.
They will never find the body. It probably, honestly, his body was gone. By the time they could have gotten down there to find it, it was probably already gone. It's probably already eaten by all of the many, many things that live on Kashyyyk, because they have a lot of stuff. They have little banthas. They have what are called tetratechics, which, if you want to Google them, they're essentially like, okay, they look like a Pokemon mixed with the Thing. I'll put a link to them in the description if you'd like. They're kind of like Rancors, but really spiky heads. Wookiees are actually native to the planet, unlike other planets where, like, the native population, like, showed up at some point and, like, just kind of took over the other planets. Wookiees evolved directly on Kashyyyk. They were birthed there, as it were.
For context, in case you missed our last episode and aren't actually familiar with Kashyyyk, despite how often it's around, Kashyyyk was introduced in the holiday special, and it has made its way into various other pieces of media, including Revenge of the Sith, Jedi Fallen Order, The Bad Batch, obviously. So it has been around for a while, but it technically was introduced in the Star Wars holiday special as the homeworld of the Wookiees.
There's an episode in Lego Star Wars, the video game episode, a level, where you play on Kashyyyk. In the prequels. So, for those of you, like me, whose lore all comes from the Lego Star Wars video games,
then you've heard of this place.
You've heard of. You've seen it, it's fine. Also, if you haven't watched the holiday special, maybe don't.
Don't.
You can listen to our episode.
Listen to our episode and you'll know everything. Some small fun meta level facts is it was originally called Kashyyyk or Gazook.
They do call it Kashyyyk. That's huge. They say that.
In George Lucas's notes, because he was gonna have it in the in the second movie. He was gonna have it in Empire Strikes Back, and they ended up cutting it. They didn't end up using it, which is part of why he put it in Holiday Special, was because he came up with a cool idea. And then for Return of the Jedi, they were going to have it mentioned that the second Death Star was built so fast. It's because it was built in orbit around Kashyyyk by Wookiee slave labor.
Oh, I hate that.
So, yeah.
Boo.
Fun fact.
Yeah, Wookiees being slaves has been, like, around forever now.
But that's one of the reasons that, like, Endor is so similar to Kashyyyk, was because they had originally, like, had all these ideas for a forest planet with the space station around it, and they changed it to the Endor and the Ewoks instead. Although they didn't use Ewoks for slave labor because they made them like primitive little teddy bears because they were cuter, presumably.
That's actually really cool. That lead us into Endor.
That does lead us into Endor. I did that on purpose.
Did you do that on purpose? I can tell.
You're like, we're doing this in alphabetical order, but Kashyyyk comes before Endor.
Well, yeah, because I had Kashyyyk as like a subset. Endor is like a subset of Kashyyyk. So I did it a little bit.
I love it.
A little bit earlier.
I've heard of Endor. I will say that.
You've heard of
Yeah.
Endor? Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like
That's
they've
crazy.
mentioned it.
Yeah, where's Endor from?
And Endor is based on the Redwoods in Northern California, I'm pretty sure.
It was filmed in the Redwoods.
Yeah. Is that the
I'm
same?
almost positive they filmed it in the Redwoods.
Given that they weren't that fucking far away.
Yeah, well, there's an episode of Parks and Rec where Ben and Leslie go to San Francisco, and he's like, I'm in the forests of Endor.
Technically, Endor is a moon of the giant planet, which is called Tana. So, yeah, sorry. Technically, there is where we see in the Return of the Jedi is the forest moon of Endor. Endor itself is the giant planet that it's revolving around. Endor itself is a gas giant. It has 9 different moons, and the largest one is the forest moon of Endor. The forest moon of Endor itself doesn't have an official name. Well, okay, it's designated IX3244-A. So we call it the forest moon of Endor because why the fuck would you say that instead?
No one would say that.
Yeah. It does get called the sanctuary moon in some places, but no one really uses that either. One of the moons is an ocean moon.
That's kind of sick. The system is also called Endor.
Yes. It's Endor all the way down.
Wow. That's rude.
I will say that, interestingly enough, they don't have a name for the planet from the Ewoks. Like, the Ewoks don't have a name for their own planet for some reason.
For the moon that they live
for
on?
the moon itself.
Yeah. They have a name for Endor, Tana, but the Ewoks themselves don't have a name listed. Oh, they don't have a name in this Wikipedia article anyways, for the forest moon itself.
Interesting.
Which I thought was weird.
I feel like that's what you name first.
Yeah, you'd think, but weirdly enough, the Ewok culture is not well thought out.
I'm gonna say no one's explored Ewok culture enough. I think
Yeah.
if someone did, like, that would be the first thing you'd put in, but...
I mean, the best you get is the Ewok movies, and they are mostly just, like, kind of racist ripoffs of Westerns with Ewoks in place of, like, the noble savage, essentially. So,
Gross.
yeah, it's not great. Oh, and Elvine! Okay. Listen, I know that I talk about the O3 Clone Wars a lot, but the reason that I talk about the O3 Clone Wars a lot is because I love them. And Nelvon is a planet. This one has a different name for the system. It's the system of Kubi in the Savarine sector. So they have different names.
Of
this
course,
time.
yeah.
Exciting.
I know exactly where you're talking about in
this-
the galaxy.
Yeah, you could find it really easily. This one is a ice planet. The whole thing is ice, similar to Hoth, but with a native population. The native population is, well, I wouldn't say kind of. It is a racist portrayal of native people with, like, pretty direct, like, ripoffs from the Inuit tribes or Native Americans or any indigenous people that you can think of. They were just kind of like, here, let's just take a bunch of stuff from those people and throw it all together. Admittedly, some of the inspiration does come from the cave people of Europe, so they weren't just being like, they were being like, let's pull inspiration from all of these, like, primitive native tribes, not just the ones that weren't white. So that's
So they're bad to indigenous people from multiple places across the world in this portrayal.
yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Cool. Equality.
Yes. Huh? So this one, the planet itself is implied to be sentient because when the whole story takes place that they do on this planet takes place around, like, the Techno Union coming in to siphon off the geothermal energy of the planet, which makes the planet even colder, which then, like, freaks the sentient implied planet out, obviously, and then, like, all of the, like, not all of them, but like Anakin who's visiting and like a bunch of the people who live there, they all get like visions about like what needs to happen to fix it. And most of it is in like very vague spiritual terms. Again, kind of racist. And they end up sending Anakin over there to fix it, and he does. Whatever. That part's cool. But the cool part is that like the planet itself, when the geothermal stuff is taken out, it gets colder. That's not how it would work. The planet itself would just like it wouldn't work like that, because like most of our heat doesn't actually come from like the core of the planet. Most of our heat comes from the sun. Yeah. But it would have an effect, just not quite this fast as it does in the show. But you know, that's just how magic works, baby.
Space fantasy, man. None of it has to make sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Like Tolkien, where like one species of people on the planet can see it as flat and the rest of them don't. You know, like, does it make sense? No. Is it cool? Yes.
It is kind of cool. It's a little cool. There's presumably multiple like tribes and stuff on the planet. We only see one, which is like a small like 15 building planet under like a mesa overhang, which is like a pretty cool vibe, not gonna lie. I really, really enjoy it when people build cities like under overhangs in like fantasy and stuff, because it looks sick. Like, I don't know if you guys have like seen the like really cool painting of the main capital city Urabine in Aragon.
I should have put money on you mentioning it.
I really enjoy it. It's really
cool.
I would never want to live in a city that's like that, but it's a really cool vibe for a city. Yeah. Like, I love when they build a city in like a creepy, dangerous place, and you're like, why would you build that? And then you consider humans and Venice, and you're like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Sometimes we do things just because they're cool, not because they're smart.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, I want to talk about Malastar, mostly because of the Zillo Beast, because the Zillo Beast is sick.
This one's from the 08 Clone Wars. We have moved from one Clone War show to the next for this one.
Yes, we have. A lot of, I will give credit to the Clone Wars in general. A lot of really cool planets show up in the Clone Wars. They do some really cool things.
08 Clone Wars.
Yeah, the 08 Clone Wars. 03 Clone Wars, not so much. They're more about, like, the aesthetic. They don't do a lot of, like, world building itself, aside from Nelvan, which I just mentioned. Most of them are just, like, there. But 08 Clone Wars did some occasionally cool planets, like Malastar, where they put some work into, like, building out the planet and, like, making it interesting to keep the kids engaged. And this is one of them. Like, underneath the surface of the planet, there's just like a large gas area where the native Zillo Beasts live. And presumably the Zillo Beasts live there because they like it. But they don't have to, because when they take the Zillo Beast out of this gas thing, it doesn't seem to affect it negatively. It's still breathing and like moving around just fine in like the Coruscant atmosphere.
There also seems to be the implication that this one, which is implied to be potentially the last ever, that the Zillo Beast is maybe underground because the other group, the
Dugs.
Thank you. The Dugs on the planet have basically exterminated the rest. So there was a danger to living on the surface that perhaps forced them underground.
For those who have not seen the 08 Clone Wars, I have Googled Zillo Beast for you. It looks like a lizard, but worse.
So the whole thing with the Zillo Beast is that it was very, very, very clearly a Godzilla homage.
Yeah. Yeah, there is that.
It doesn't look like Godzilla, but like it is, the storyline and the way it's used in the story is very much a Godzilla homage. So it is supposed to look like this kind of giant monster creature of sorts. But yes, it is basically just like a lot of long scaly noodles
it's
attached together.
Like finger appendages, they're flat and they look like they're made out of paper. And I don't understand how he's hanging onto a wall with his little papery, long, stringy hands. But anyway, I understand why they're scary and people might kill them. That's all.
Yeah. Malastar is actually Sebulba's home planet. Fun fact. Sebulba is a Dug, and Dugs are the native population of Malastar, even though in the Senate they are not represented by Dugs, which really, really, really annoys me, because they're represented by the Gran, and the Gran are not native there. They are colonizers who just showed up and started taking their shit, and the Dugs are actually the ones who live there. Some of the Dugs are good people. They're not. But it's still their planet, and how dare they?
That feels very much like someone somewhere realized there was a mix-up that happened here, where, like, you know, someone was like, this is the Malastare contingent, and it looks incorrect from the people that we end up seeing on Malastare later, and so there has to be an explanation made about why that happened, and so they came up with this, like, the ones who are in the Senate are in fact colonizers of these guys. It's like, okay, sure, yeah, why not?
I mean, there are, like, other examples, like Naboo, where, like, they have two different species who live there, and, like, they work together eventually, but, like, this is not what, like,
yeah, and Tatooine with the Tuscans and stuff.
Yeah, although, yeah, they also don't work together. Or, Mon Cala. Speaking of Mon Cala, I love Mon Cala. I love the calamari. They're so cool. For some tragic things, if you enjoy the calamari, if you enjoy Admiral Akbar, and you want to get into Legends, I will warn you now. Do not read too far. Do not read too far. Do not go into the Vong War, because you will not be happy, because I am not happy about what happens to the calamari in the Vong War, because, spoilers, skip ahead a couple seconds, I guess, because they kill them all. They're all dead. They are all dead. They all die. The planet gets boiled, and it's really depressing.
That's really intense.
The reason that people were okay with Legends, like, getting rebooted originally was because it got so big and the stakes had to keep getting upped and upped and upped and upped and upped, and they did stupid shit like this where they just, like, ruined the whole planet to make everybody sad in the story, to, like, make sure you felt some emotions because you were invested in this planet. And it really annoys me because I feel like you could have done that without getting rid of the entire planet. Anyways.
Wow, it's almost like we're seeing that happen all over again.
Yeah, at a much faster pace, too.
I know. Well, I mean, they rebooted it and then immediately, like, we're like, we've got a big Death Star that kills 5 planets at once now. Take that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Mon Cala is pretty cool. They have mostly ocean. There are islands, but both of the two races that evolved on Mon Cala are both, they're both from there. Like, they didn't evolve somewhere else, and then, like, one of them showed up there, like, on the name that I just said, Malastare. They both live there. Fun fact, Mon Cala is also called Dak in the Legends lore. It's not called Mon Cala, it's called Dak. I don't know why it has 2 different names, but it does.
Welcome to Legends.
Yeah, welcome to Legends. So there's the aquatic species of the Mawapa, who they kind of look like mind flayers.
Oh.
If
Okay.
anyone's interested in D&D, mind flayers, like the long tentacles, they kind of look like that.
Is this the corn?
Oh, sorry, I misspoke. You're correct. It is the corn. Mawapa was the previous species. They are simply an aquatic species of glowing invertebrates, and I read it wrong. My apologies. The Quarren live in the bottom of the ocean, and they are what happens when the octopus take over. The Mon Calamari are more similar to...
The Mon Calamari, I mean, they are effectively fish.
Squid is
like
a good...
squid.
Yeah.
I would have gone for squid for the Quarren, though, because the Quarren have the whole mouth.
They have the tentacles. It's true.
Tentacles. Like, the Mon Calamari just kind of look like big fish.
Yeah.
Like, they've got the big eyes and the big mouth.
But I feel like the Pyjack are more similar to, like, fish.
The pikes.
Pikes! Yes. Thank you. Really original name for the fish people. I mean, granted, these people are called the Mon Calamari.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
It hasn't been original the whole time.
I think the pikes I wouldn't say look like fish to me, but that's just a personal thing. But also the pikes do not live in water.
They have the similar, like, big eyes that the calamari do, though.
Yeah, they also, a lot of their look is like armor. Like, what we think of them as their look is like kind of a big armor thing that they've got, as opposed to what the people inside, I guess, actually look like. But yeah, the Mon Cala, I mean, especially like, if you look at like Akbar kind of just looks
He's kind of got a fish face.
I'd say.
Yeah. I love Akbar so much.
And we love him.
He does have a fish face. But he's more like he's like a catfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that they're more similar to a catfish, and then like the Quarren are more similar to a squid.
Like squid, yeah, for sure. I think the Quarren are very specifically squid.
The Mon Calamari live mostly on the surface in like the like mid range up top, and then like the Quarren mostly live in the bottom, which is cool. They also have like a really cool thing where they have schools of pufferfish, which just like go around the ocean and eat toxins. It's like their own like filter for the planet itself, which I think is fascinating. They just like evolved this thing to clean up their ecological mess, which is nice because, you know, everybody has an ecological mess.
So, Mon Cala shows up in Clone Wars in a large kind of, you know, 4-episode arc. It's actually one of my more favorite ones in Clone Wars is the Water Wars, I believe they call it.
Oh, yeah.
So the Quarren and the Mon Cala do not particularly like each other. Is part of the problem, is that the Mon Cala actually, like, for all that, like you said, they both evolved there, but the Mon Cala seem to be the more dominant race on the planet. And have been for a very long time. The Quarrens have a little bit of an issue with this, and there is a separate aquatic species that comes in that are clearly sharks, who kind of are working with Dooku and the Separatists and push the Quarrens to start a revolution of sorts. And there's this whole thing with the Quarrens and the fighting against the Mon Cala, which is very interesting. And there is. It feels like parallels to Gungans in the Naboo with this idea that there is like, you know, a lack of representation happening for the Quarren on their own planet that they are trying to get. They also appear to have a monarchy, the Mon Cala at least, have a monarchy, much like Alderaan, where it seems to be passed down by birthright, and so there is no election that happens in Mon Cala, and if the person is very young, they're very young, and everybody just has to live with their new king, not knowing what the fuck he's doing. And so, like, poor Akbar is running around doing really dumb shit because his poor little prince doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and instead of helping his little prince know what the fuck he's doing, he's just like, you have to make a decision, and the prince makes a decision, and he's like, cool, that's a shit-ass decision, I'm gonna go do it. It's a weird thing that happens, and Akbar has to kind of figure out how to, like, balance, like, no, like, maybe you should be pushing some of your experience onto your poor teenaged prince. Give him some assistance, and being respectful of the fact that this guy is supposed to be your new king or whatever now. So there is an interesting political subplot kind of happening on Mon Cala. They reach a sort of accord by the end of the arc. But of course, we don't really know where that lands post-Empire because nobody has gone to Mon Cala in canon, after the Empire takes over yet.
Poor Mon Cala. They go through so much. Okay, this is a random planet that the only real source for it is some random books, some atlases, and a few video games. But I thought this planet was really cool because this planet essentially has 3 suns, so it's constantly undergoing different gravitational pulls on the planet. So the people who live on this planet are like incredibly material averse. They do not want to own anything because as a culture they've evolved to do that because anytime their entire city could just be like destroyed by an earthquake, a tsunami, like anything could happen because the planet itself is like really just incredibly unstable, and they have a pretty low level of sunlight because they have their atmosphere itself is like very, very, very dense. So it's kind of a shitty place to live, honestly, but people do live here. And so like everywhere on the planet is just like old cities that are just completely wrecked that people move to like from as they build new cities, and they're really, really good at constructing new cities because they have to all of the time. I just thought that was like a really interesting thing. There is one description where they talk about how during the Cold War between the Galactic Republic and the reconstituted Sith Empire, the constant earthquakes caused the city walls to sway back and forth like ocean waves, which I thought was a really cool description for like the shit that happened on this planet.
It's called Riff Lore. I don't know if we named it.
Yes.
Lore. I love the idea of gravity just like changing. I mean, I don't, because that's devastating and tragic and terrible for the people who live there. But also it's a little bit funny to be like, gravity's just a different way now and your city's fucked. Sorry.
Yeah, most of the information about it is in a comic. Obi-Wan gets trapped here because he gets trapped fucking everywhere. And Anakin shows up to save him because was like 90% of Anakin and Obi-Wan comics. Ooh, this one you will know. So this planet is called Corzite, located in the Corzite system. Grid square M13, by the way, in case you were wondering, on the standard galactic grid.
Does that mean something to most people? Okay, Sugar says
I
no.
don't know. Make sure you know where it is.
This deep fan bullshit here, but yes.
So this one also shows up in Clone Wars. This one shows up in the Bounty Hunter arc when Boba Fett is like a small child.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. This is the Asajj Ventress one.
Yes, this is the Asajj Ventress planet. This planet, it has a hollow crust, so everything that happens on this planet is underground because the like atmosphere pressure means that you cannot stand on the surface of this planet or you will be squished. You will be crushed. The atmosphere is so strong and the pressure is so much that you will no longer exist. So to get into the planet, they have a space elevator where you get onto the space elevator and it delivers you underground and spits you out underground. And then they have trams underground that take you from like city to city. I mean, people also walk, but they also have trains.
Also, isn't there's like people underground who are like riding animals? Like there's a whole community underground that are like riding something. Is it bugs? It's bugs, right? Isn't it like large bugs?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are like bug-like. But the reason that life has evolved on this planet is because there are crystalline structures in the underground caverns that have evolved to emit a violet light that allows them to grow things underground because there's no sunlight down there. So instead, they have this light coming out of their crystals and an oxygen-rich atmosphere underground. So somehow the pressure, I don't know how this exactly works, but somehow the pressure above the crust does not affect them below the crust, which...
That sounds like magic.
It's not magic necessarily. It just means that they have, like, very few holes between the crust and the surface of the planet. Otherwise, all that atmosphere would be, like, escaping and there would be, like, an interchange.
Also, the crust must be super strong.
Yeah. Presumably they have, like, a pretty thick crust before they get to the actual underground. Which also begs the question of, like, how, like, space fare, like, evolved on this planet. Like, did someone go to the planet and, like, dig down and find them? Or, like, did they come up from the crust and, like, figure out how to go to space from there? That's not really explained a lot, but it does make me really curious as to, like, what order that happened in. And, like, presumably it would be simpler if Spacefair found them. But then that begs the question of, like, why they came there at all to this crushing planet and started digging.
5-year mission to explore new worlds. New civilizations. Just to make this more confusing. And break out into some Star Trek right in the middle. This is another planet where you get the feeling that, like, there's two groups of people here, one of colonizers and one of native. That those bug riders are native and that the others are maybe not. But
they actually both evolved on the planet.
Did they both evolve on the planet? Okay. Mm-hmm. But so it's more like Mon Cala, where they both evolved on the planet, but one is more dominant.
Yes. So one of them evolved in the water, and one of them evolved not in the water.
Nice.
Yeah.
How is there water? There's water underground?
Yeah, there's like underwater lakes and basins and stuff underneath in the crust. So the Belugans, original, they kind of look like whales. So they evolved in the lakes and the rivers and stuff underground. But the Kage, I guess they're called, are more human-like. And they evolved in the subterranean cities and like more away from the water. So which means that presumably that there are like higher concentrations of water in like some parts of the planet than others, that they evolved separately and like didn't intermingle until like they became more like evolved, because otherwise you would have a lot of like, intermarriage and stuff, and you would have like one main species. That always like is my main question about like planets that have two separate evolved sentient species. It's like, what do their children look like? Because if you have two species on the same planet, they gonna fuck. It gonna happen. We did not kill the Neanderthals. We fucked them. That's what happened.
That's but counterpoint, just because you fuck something doesn't mean that that's a viable, like, that you have offspring from that.
That's true.
If you're evolving completely separate and your reproductive systems are not compatible, you don't necessarily end up, I mean, there are a lot of, like, we live on a planet with more than 2 species, but, like, there are a lot of species on the planet that could fuck each other and nothing would happen.
That's a good point.
And species, like you said, that do provide children, but those children cannot then have children.
Right, yeah. Like, you can have,
mules.
yeah.
Mules.
Mules.
Yes.
Like, you can have, a mule will show up. They will have kids.
Yeah, and like ligers and things like that. Like a lion and a tiger can have a kid. That kid cannot then have kids.
Yeah.
Well,
So they don't necessarily, like, just because you have 2 evolved species doesn't mean that there is eventually going to be one that they're going to come together.
but I believe this is the 5th planet we've been talking about that has 2 co-evolved species. And it does happen. Like, polar bears and grizzlies, they can have babies, and those babies can have babies. Pizzlies,
Yeah.
grizzlies, whatever you want to call them, like, that is a thing that can happen. So, presumably, it would happen in at least one case.
Yeah, you make the solid point that, like, no one's explored that option.
I feel
Yeah.
like when they make these planets where they have 2 evolved species, the question needs to come up, can they fucking have a child? And can that children
Yeah.
have children? Like, I feel like when you're world building and you're like, let's have 2 different species. Great, that's a good plan. I like it. We need to address it, at least in your own notes. So it's in the universe what is going to happen if these 2 species intermingle.
Yeah, we only have one super canonical source of 2 completely separate species having a child together, I believe, and I'm fairly certain it's Jason Syndulla. But this is the only actual canonical character who is the offspring of 2 very completely different species.
I thought that
wonder if Jason
Clone's
can have kids.
wife's kids were also canonically like half human. Like they're not canonically his kids, but they are canonically half human. Am I wrong?
Are they canonically half human?
Because they look half human.
Except that, like, they look nothing like Jason looks now. Like, the design choice for Sue LeQuain's children look absolutely nothing like the design choices made for Jason. Because, like, the thing with Sue LeQuain's children, because it's the exact same combination of human and Twi'lek. And so...
Okay, but counterpoint, just because you cross a golden retriever and a poodle does not mean the children are all going to come out the same.
No, yes. But it is still very, very different design choices. Like, one was like, oh, they come out looking more Twi'lek, but they have mottled skin, versus the other one where, like, all of a sudden, Jason has green hair.
Yeah.
Like, I would have been more okay if they just gone the other direction, been like, okay, he's more human, but he has the mottled skin, but, like, more human-like. Like, thing, the combination happening. But then with Jason, they went, he's gonna have green hair.
That's all we're going to do.
Yeah. That's all we're
I'm
gonna do.
just dying inside a little bit.
Okay, in fairness, he also has orange skin, and they decided that just meant that he was Hispanic. So...
I mean, it's like, I think it's brown, but, like, you know, it's like maybe not lit super well. He was clearly thrown together very quickly as a design, as a model. But I think it is meant to be browner to reference canon, presumably.
Maybe it's like a sliding scale that, like, you can either come out looking mostly human or, like, not, like, mostly Twi'lek. You know, like, you...
Right, I just don't understand where hair color came into this, like...
Well, the kids in Clone Wars, the ones we're talking about, they don't have hair at all. They have Leku.
They do, yes. But they also have mottled skin.
So, presumably, like, if you're sliding it more towards Twi'lek, you get Leku. If you're sliding more towards human, you get hair.
Yes, understand. Why did the hair color become green?
Because her skin was green, and so he picked up that...
That's
I don't
not
understand
how that works.
the allele for Twi'lek skin color is really similar to the allele for human hair color.
Oh my god.
Anyway, we have gotten way off track. I'm so sorry.
No,
I would like to interrupt. I would like to interrupt and say there are multiple known hybrid pairings. It's usually humans and something else,
Yes.
but Quarrens and Mon Calamari do canonically have a hybrid. However, when I click on the link to try to get the source of that, it's like, it's in this comic, and then they don't tell me how it happens in the comic. They're just like, this comic exists.
Okay.
Yeah, which could just be like you see a pair of them in the background with a child, and
That's
you can
right,
make the
yeah.
assumption.
But, like,
Yeah.
Two things. One, if Twi'leks and humans can have kids, it doesn't actually make sense for there to not be, like, hundreds of them running around. Because, for some reason, they have decided that Twi'leks are, like, all of the sex workers in Star Wars. Like, 90% of the time, if you meet a sex worker in Star Wars, they make them a Twi'lek. So, that's not a very safe occupation most of the time.
In terms of not wanting to reproduce, or in terms of, like, safety in general?
In general.
I mean, both, but
Okay.
I think we're going more towards reproduction here.
But also
Yeah.
reproduction, it's often unsafe because slavery is a thing. And when you are a slave, you don't have control over your own body autonomy and, like, whether or not you have kids. So there should be, like, a lot of, like, crossover children happening of human Twi'lek collaborations, as one would say. And we only seen, like, 3 or 4 of them in high canon. Admittedly, we don't see a lot of aliens, but, like, you would think you would see them in, like, the background, at least, or something. But it's one of the things that frustrates me about, like, the world building in Star Wars is that, like, if you take time to think about it, there should be way more of, like, this thing or that thing, and, like, there's not. Like, if there's possible to have, like, children between 2 evolved species, like there is for the Mon Calamari and the Quarren, as we just learned, then these 2 species should have, like, co-intermingled a lot before this. Like,
However, what we haven't confirmed is, can that child continue to have children?
that is a good point.
Which means, like, yes, you could theoretically make a child, but if that child is now infertile, then you're still not going to make a whole species that's intermingled.
But, counterpoint, we
Yeah.
have mules everywhere. Granted, we make them on purpose, but they are still,
Yes.
like, pretty common. So you would still, even if they couldn't have kids,
You would see
they would
them.
still be fairly common.
Yeah,
Dark.
it'd be interesting to have more hybrid, like intentionally hybrid characters in Star Wars.
It would be. I mean, they'd have to put more
Yeah.
thought into it, though, and that costs money. Everybody knows that.
It wouldn't necessarily be in high canon, but you could get more in, like, the books and
That's
comics and
true.
stuff of, like, actual characters getting explored there.
Yeah. You would also have to put more aliens in, which Star Wars is allergic to doing.
Again, you get a lot
So-
more of these in books and comics.
In
things,
books and
but-
comics, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like D&D, where you have, like, a bajillion, like, half-orcs, half-elves, but it's always half-human. There's not a lot of, like, half-orc, half-elf, or half-orc,
Yeah.
half-gnome. Like, it's always, like, half-human, half this. And, like,
yeah.
if they can breed with a human, presumably something else could breed together as well. But maybe humans are just hoes.
I think that is the conclusion that we come to in our science fiction, is humans will fuck anything.
That's true. That's a good point. We already knew this, though.
Do you want to hit your last 2?
Yes, so we have 2 more. One is the Wellspring of Life, which is a fucking weird planet. It's a weird planet. And this is also brought in OA Clone Wars. And it is known as the Force Planet. It is the home world of midichlorians. They just dropped this shit on you. It's season 6 of Clone Wars.
Oh, is this the Yoda Force Ghost arc?
This is the Yoda Force Ghost arc, where he goes to a planet where all life came from here. All of it. They just dropped this on you in the middle of OA Clone Wars. They're like, yeah, here's the origin of life in the universe. You're welcome. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It appears to be barren, save for luminescent geysers that release energy from inside the planet. And then he goes inside it and has, like, a bunch of weird visions and stuff. It is in the middle of the galaxy. It's in the deep core of the galaxy. So I don't know why no one else ever goes there, except I presume for shenanigans, I guess. And no one knows about it except for the Jedi, also for reasons. Even though it's the
What?
origin of all life in the galaxy, again.
And no one else in the galaxy is interested in the origin of life.
No.
Okay, sure.
Maybe it's been kept a secret.
It's possible that only the Jedi know about it and they don't tell anybody else to keep it protected. But since the Jedi don't actually have a monopoly on the Force, like, I know
Yeah.
people act like they do, but they don't actually, and they
Yeah.
don't actually care that much. Presumably, like, if this is the wellspring of life and the Force, like, teaches people lessons here, as it does with Yoda, other, like, Force users would also be drawn here.
Although Yoda is drawn there by Qui-Gon, is he not? Like, he starts hearing Qui-Gon pulling him places.
That's true. That's a good
And
point.
so he doesn't just go there on his own for random reasons. Like, he is intentionally getting reached out to by someone he knows who says, come here, as I recall.
That's a good point, but counterpoint, the priestess is there who, like, speak to Yoda and they give him his trials. It kind of seems like this isn't, like, the first time they've done this. Like, they talk about it like this
for
is
sure.
a test that, like, other people have gone through. So, I mean, maybe only the Jedi do it, but, like, I assume this wasn't set up by the Jedi to do this. Like, they don't control the priestesses or anything.
No, absolutely not.
So it's confusing.
But it might be that, like, you don't, like, the Force has to reach out to you and bring you there.
That's, yeah. So presumably it would only bring back people who, like, wouldn't hurt it.
Yeah, that there's, like, an intentional choice being made about who gets to discover this planet. Like you were saying earlier, Force shenanigans are kind of what's keeping this planet sort of more undiscovered.
Fun fact, the interior of this planet is hollow. It's just hollow. Inside the planet is hollow. There's nothing in there. They don't have a core or anything. It just spins on its own, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, that's how planets work. And then inside the planet, there's like a bunch of islands that just float inside the planet for reasons. I don't know why in Star Wars the Force just means things don't have to obey physics sometimes.
It's fantasy. Nothing has to obey physics.
I know, but...
It's a galaxy far, far away. They can have whatever physics they want.
I like it better when they manipulate physics, not ignore physics.
Yeah.
It's a personal opinion, I guess, but okay. There is life on the planet. There's like animals and stuff. The animals don't have to eat and they don't have to drink, and anything who comes there, like, they don't have to eat because they're just sustained by all of the force that's coming off the planet all of the time. So you don't have to sleep either. I mean, Yoda does get knocked out a couple times, but he doesn't have to. So
That is weird.
yeah, it's a weird planet. It's cool, but it's weird.
It is also very clearly there for narrative purposes and not for world building purposes.
Yeah.
Like, the planet does what it needs to do to make that Force Ghost arc move forward.
The whole planet is a Deus Ex Machina.
Plot device.
Yes.
Deus Ex Machina.
Deus Ex Machina. The whole thing is just Deus Ex Machina. It just does what the plot needs to do. It's a MacGuffin, as it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last one I want to talk about, I find incredibly fascinating. Okay, so you guys know Zam, the bounty hunter who's a shapeshifter. Or a changeling, or whatever they call her.
From
Attack of the Clones. This is the
Yes.
woman who attacks Padme. She puts
Yes.
the little buggies into her window, and then they chase her
Yes.
through the city.
And then Django kills her.
Yes. And then she's not as hot, which is unfortunate.
She's not as hot. Okay, so this planet is so interesting. Okay, so at some point, like the planet had their sentient species evolving, they're called the Claudites. There was a spike in solar activity that bathed the entire planet in radiation. And either you died or you evolved the trait to, like, modify your skin tone and, like, your skin, essentially, modify your body. So this, like, evolved directly. They essentially mutated into shapeshifters to survive so they could survive the radiation that was, like, bathing their planet. So most species that survived after this spike are able to shapeshift or chameleon after this. Even after the radiation dropped, they retained this evolutionary advantage, presumably because it gave them an advantage. But a lot of species just, like, couldn't handle it and died. So the planet itself, most of it is now just, like, a wasteland because of it, and it's, like, kind of slowly dying because of the damage that was done. But there are still, like, trees and mountains there, but they're incredibly fought over, which is why a lot of people leave to become bounty hunters, because, one, you're a shapeshifter, which is really, really useful in bounty hunting, and, two, because they need money, and there's no money to be had when the planet is slowly losing more and more of its nice places to live.
That's fascinating.
Like, the idea of, like, a planet where, like, everything has evolved to, like, change its body shape because of the radiation is fascinating.
That's cool.
I really enjoyed this one.
If you liked that, I'm gonna promote The Glass Abyss.
The what?
Which is The Glass Abyss, which is a book written very recently about Mace Windu.
Ooh.
Where the world that he goes to, I kind of mentioned this to you in our conversation we had a little while ago, Faye, but also had some sort of solar radiation thing, but it's implied that the planet gets a massive solar radiation something or other every 1,000 years. And so the native fauna, less so the flora, but the fauna, have evolved to effectively change when the planet gets glassed once every 1,000 years.
Ooh.
That's sick.
So
That's
it just
fun.
And so they just kind of, like, churn into something else when the planet gets glassed at that point, and then, you know, obviously, like, presumably go back when it, like, fixes itself after a while, and then it gets glassed again the next 1,000 years, and they go back. And so it's like, not every animal that's born has to use that ability, but it's in there latent for whenever it happens.
That's really
just
cool.
in case.
So it's like an environmentally flipped switch. Like, they don't control when it happens. It's just like if they hit the right circumstances that
Yes, that
That's
seems
cool.
to be the
Ooh.
implication. Like, Mace, we're hearing all of this through Mace's perspective, and Mace does not know shit all. Like, he's effectively having to make very educated guesses as he goes through. He's like, that is weird as shit. I guess this must be the explanation. Moving on. And so you kind of have to take his word for it here. There's nobody who's, like, actually studied this, because for obvious reasons, the people who live on the planet are all, like, most of them are settlers. Almost all of them are settlers. There's a couple of native species that are living below ground. But, like, almost everybody is a settler there, and every 1,000 years, things get very difficult. And so a lot of them don't survive, and then the ones that are left are having to struggle to figure out how to survive, and probably many of them don't survive that struggle either. And so there's not a lot of time or energy left to spend on what the fuck is happening to our planet,
It's very Game of Thrones.
A little bit of Game of Thrones, yeah, that, like, we cannot be doing this. So they're all living underground. They have currently, like, I think it just got glass like 50 years prior to the book starting. And so they all live underground in this giant, like, geode cave with a city that they have created inside the giant geode cave. And there's different layers. So there are, like, core layers that they talk about. So they're like, okay, you have one layer down, not far enough. This is where we put the poor people. They're all dying from radiation. You go another down, and that's, like, stuff, that, like, they've put stuff there, and then you one more, and that's, like, the hangar where all the ships are, then one more, and that's your big city, and then you keep going down about 10 levels or so. And so there's, like, multiple layers to where people are living, and it looks very, very different the further down you go, including this big bioluminescent, like, mushroom forest, like how you were describing Kashyyyk, except mushrooms underground.
That's really cool.
I love that.
I want to live in a
It's
geode.
adorable. Like, they just live either around or inside these enormous bioluminescent mushrooms. There's, like, how, like, in, like, fantasy forest things, there's, like, bridges, like suspension bridges, like, across the trees that you can get from tree to tree. Like the community exists only in the treetops, so you have to have, like, streets and stuff. So you create, like, these, like, bridges and walkways between the trees. So they have that, but between mushrooms.
So cute.
So
Oh my god.
there's this whole thing. There's, like, it's the world building in this book is really, really good. So if you're into wackadoozy but really well written, like, planet world building, Mace Windu: The Glass Abyss is for you.
I love that.
We are not being sponsored.
We're absolutely not being sponsored.
Not
I just
sponsored.
read it recently and I thought it was good. Also, if you happen to really like Mace Windu, this book is also for you.
Which everyone should. He's the best.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you guys like a goat fact?
Always.
I would love a goat fact.
Goats' pupils, like many hoofed animals, are rectangular. This gives them visions for 320 to 340 degrees, compared to humans who have 160 around them without having to move, and they are thought to have excellent night vision. You probably already know this if you
Nice.
like looked at a goat, but they have rectangular pupils, so they can see
This is
like almost
new
all the way around their
information
head.
to me.
Oh well, you're welcome. Are you
Wait,
disturbed?
what was it you said? If you never looked at a goat?
I think we lost her.
We lost her. She did say her phone was at 3%
She
about
did.
10 minutes ago. So I think that her phone might have just died.
Yeah, it's a good time for it to die.
But also, it's right on her very distressed face. Poor thing. Just like, why did you tell me this? I have to live with this now.
Our intro and outro music is Mos Eisley Cantina by Speedkicks. Angela and I edit, our artwork is by me, and Sugar is our writer and researcher. You can find us on Instagram and Tumblr at Unleash the Goats. Thanks for listening.